Does the acoustic guitar you just recorded sound barky, dull, and muddy all at the same time? You know you need to fix it, but you're not quite sure which tool to use to get the awesome sound you're looking for? In this video, we're going to explore the most basic tools of audio, the wonderful world of equalization. By the end of this video, you'll be an EQ magician and will be able to use your new knowledge to create cleaner, well-balanced mixes. Ready to get started? Someone hit record. Hi kids, my name is Merlin and I'd like to welcome you to Better Home Recordings. Today we're going to take a look at equalization, otherwise known as EQ. What are the different types of EQs and when and how should you use each of them? At the end of this video, I'll have a Better Home Recording super tip for you that will elevate you to the EQ Guru Order of Merlin. So be sure to stick around for that handy tip. So, what is EQing? Equalizers, commonly referred to as EQs, are the most basic tools used in all aspects of audio production, including recording, mixing, mastering, live sound, and many other areas of telecommunication. Equalization is the process of adjusting the balance between frequency components within an electronic signal. The circuit or equipment used to achieve equalization is called an EQ. EQs strengthen or weaken the energy of specific frequency bands or frequency ranges. They can be used to correct treble frequencies, such as removing the low end of certain instruments to clear up muddiness, or used to add clarity or sparkle to something like an acoustic guitar or vocal. Some EQs are more accurate than others, allowing you to surgically remove frequencies that may be causing problems in your mix, whereas other EQs will add or remove a bigger band of frequencies, allowing you to be more aggressive in your corrections. In addition to knowing what types of EQs are available to you, you'll also need to learn how to identify and understand all the different frequencies of the spectrum and how to use your EQ to adjust these frequencies to create a sonically balanced recording. EQs are generally available in either a hardware or a software plugin form. Fortunately, they work the same way in either form, so it should be easy to adapt to either type of EQ when faced with a choice. For the most part though, my guess is that you'll be dealing with software plugins in your home studio, so that's what we'll concentrate on today. So, what are the different types of EQs available? In the pro audio world, we generally work with graphic EQs, parametric EQs, linear phase EQs, and dynamic EQs. Now let's dive into the differences between them and their application in music production. First up is a graphic EQ. A graphic EQ works by separating frequencies into banks of frequencies, each controlled by a slider with which you can add or remove gain to each frequency as needed. The more frequencies contained on a graphic EQ, the more accurate your adjustments can be. Usually, a graphic EQ will contain between 10 and 31 sliders to control various EQ frequencies. A graphic equalizer for live sound reinforcement typically has 31 bands for more precise control of feedback problems and equalization of room modes. This type of graphic equalizer is called a 1/3 octave equalizer because the center frequency of its filters are spaced 1/3 of an octave apart, with 3 filters to an octave. While you'll generally see graphic EQs applied to live sound situations rather than to the studio, there are times when the shaping a graphic EQ can provide will be useful in various mix situations. Say, for example, shaping the sound of a group bus or notching out a particularly annoying frequency. So don't be afraid to experiment with all the various EQ tools you have available to you, including the graphic EQ. Next is a parametric EQ. Parametric equalizers are multi-band variable equalizers which allow users to control 3 primary parameters: gain, center frequency, and bandwidth. The gain of each band can be controlled, and the center frequency can be shifted, and the bandwidth, also referred to as Q, can be widened or narrowed. Parametric equalizers are capable of making much more precise adjustments to sound than other equalizers, and are commonly used in sound recording and also live sound. Most DAWs generally come with a parametric EQ as one of its standard plugins. The parametric is easily the most common type of EQ used in the box. The controllable parameters in a parametric EQ are gain. The gain control allows you to either boost or cut the selected frequency by a certain amount. Fairly straightforward, I know. The center frequency. The center frequency allows you to select which frequency you are affecting in the spectrum. Q factor, or simply Q. Q factor is defined as the ratio of a center frequency to its bandwidth. Basically, That means that the Q will adjust the size of the center frequency band you are affecting. A higher Q will narrow the surrounding affected frequencies, and a lower Q will widen the surrounding affected frequencies. When engineers refer to using an EQ surgically, they are generally referring to a very narrow Q used to make a precise boost or cut to a specific frequency. Low and high pass filters. Parametric EQs generally feature both a high pass filter and a low pass filter. A high pass filter allows you to set up a steeper than normal EQ curve, which allows you to filter out the low end frequencies of a vocal or particular instrument. A low pass filter does exactly the same thing to the other end of the frequency and allows you to filter out high end frequencies of a particular channel. Using both high and low pass filters will help you to create space for the various instruments to live in your mix. For example, high passing the vocals, guitars, and keyboards will allow the kick drum some room to breathe on its own without fighting the other instruments for its own place in the mix. Shelving EQ. Many parametric EQs feature the option to change the lowest frequency band and the highest frequency band into what's referred to as shelving EQ, rather than the standard parametric EQ function. The term shelf comes from the way in which the EQ curves look. Where parametric EQs will have steeper curves, a shelving EQ will have a smooth curve which slopes to form a shelf-like shape, as you can see here. Shelving EQ is known for being more of a smoother shaping tool that affects frequencies in a much more musical manner, and are perfect for boosting or removing the top and bottom end in a subtle but pleasing way. Next up, linear phase EQ. A linear phase EQ works much like a parametric EQ does. However, one of the issues with a parametric EQ is that when you adjust the frequencies you change become slightly out of phase with the rest of the frequencies in the channel's signal. Linear phase EQs are designed to keep this out of phase condition from happening. Oddly enough, a lot of engineers don't particularly like this effect as they prefer the color that a particular parametric EQ may impart on a track. A linear phase EQ tends to not color the sound the way a standard parametric EQ does, and are sometimes described as too clean. Linear phase EQs can be really useful when tracking an instrument with multiple microphones, such as drums, where correct phasing is crucial. Moving on to the dynamic EQ. A dynamic EQ can be thought of as a hybrid cross between a compressor and a parametric EQ. With a parametric EQ, any changes to EQ levels applied to the signal will stay that way unless you manually change it. With a dynamic EQ, you can set a threshold, attack, and release, this is the compressor part, so that the EQ correction only applies when the signal passes that point. This is really useful when mastering, as you can bring down cymbal levels or remove sibilants much as a de-esser would. The advantage is, unlike a de-esser, a dynamic EQ can boost particular frequency levels as well as cut them. This makes it a bit more flexible than a multiband compressor. Dynamic EQs can be very useful for adding an extra dimension to your mixes, controlling frequency challenges, or just overall sculpting of your mix. Okay kids, that brings us to today's Better Home Recording Super Tip. EQing is the most basic of processes, yet one of the most critical parts of your recordings. Proper use of EQ can save a less than stellar recording or can sink the mightiest battleship of a mix. Knowing when to use EQ and how much to use is the key. Try to remember that EQing is a subtle art. Unless you're trying to create a specific effect, say a vocal that sounds like it's going through a megaphone, you should try to use EQ as a sculpting tool rather than a frequency chainsaw. Granted, there are times when chainsaw EQ can be advantageous, but the norm should be to use the EQ only when needed and sparingly when you do put it in the signal path. Concentrate on recording signals that are clean and great sounding first. It's much easier to get it right going to tape than it is to try and correct a poorly recorded instrument later. Sometimes you really can't fix it in the mix. And with that, congratulations! You've now earned your EQ Guru Order of Merlin. I'm so glad you stopped by today. If you have any questions on anything discussed in this video or would like to suggest a subject for a future video, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. A quick shout out to producerhive.com and soundbridge.io for providing some of the technical details used in today's video. Links in the description. That's it for now, kids. I hope to see you again soon, and remember, the first rule of better home recordings is there are no rules. Be sure to check out my other videos that you'll find useful for your home studio here, and please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more fun and information. I would very much appreciate your continued support. See you soon.